Hi, my name's Adeline, and my mom didn't ask me to play at my sister's wedding. She ordered me to, in a beige dress that didn't match. Seated by the speaker stack, not the stage. I was the background music to her favorite daughter's big day. They thought I'd stay silent, that I'd sit there, obedient, and disappear into the keys. But I didn't play what they gave me. I played everything they tried to erase, and when the speakers cut to my father's voice, when the room heard the truth, they buried. They turned on the ones who buried it. Their faces, you'll never forget. Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been used by your own family just to make someone else shine? The envelope came on a Thursday. No return address, just cream cardstock with a gold border and my mailbox number written in shaky pen strokes. For a moment, I thought it was some leftover junk mail or a church bulletin sent by mistake. Then I opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation. Callista's wedding. My sister, or more accurately, Vera's daughter. It read, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Callista Wren and Emerson Hayes. We would love for you to be part of this special day. As our piano guest, tentative." No name, just that label. Piano guest. Tentative. I stared at it so long the corners started to curl from the heat of my fingers. There wasn't even a formal greeting. No, "Dear Odalyn," no, "We hope you'll come." Just an assumption that I'd show up, play something soft, stay quiet, and leave unnoticed. My thumb brushed over the embossed ink like it could reveal something kinder beneath. It didn't. I folded the card twice, slowly, then pressed it flat again and placed it inside the drawer under my dish towels. The light in my kitchen was warm that afternoon. It was spring in Savannah, and the dogwoods were blooming again, like they hadn't watched me grow bitter over years of being invisible. I had a lesson to teach at the community center later. One of my regular students, Jolie, 12, braces, big brown eyes, was waiting when I arrived. As I tuned the upright Yamaha, she bounced on the bench and said, "Miss Wren, I saw your sister in Bridal Style magazine at Walgreens. She's so pretty." I smiled. The kind that doesn't touch your eyes. "She's getting married soon," I said, adjusting the music stand. "Big wedding." Jolie tilted her head. "Will you be in it?" I didn't answer. I handed her the sheet music and asked her to play the scales. But inside, something shifted. That familiar itch behind the ribs when someone says your sister's name like it's dipped in gold, and yours like it's an afterthought, if at all. Callista always belonged to the spotlight. Even as kids, she was the one with matching hair ribbons and piano recitals that ended in standing ovations. I was the quiet one in the corner, clapping too hard, too long, just to feel part of it. After class, I sat in my car a while before heading home. The dashboard clock glowed 5:42 p.m., but I didn't start the engine. I just watched the kids spill out of the center, laughing, backpacks swinging, full of that careless energy I used to think would last forever. My phone rang. Vera. "Hi, Mom," I answered, already bracing. "Oh, good," she said. "I was hoping to catch you. We're finalizing things for the wedding." I waited. She continued. "Callista wants it tasteful, elegant, no distractions, so we were thinking maybe you could play something light, background music, nothing dramatic, of course." I could hear the clink of her spoon stirring something ceramic, like I was just another item on her checklist, somewhere between seating charts and floral arrangements. "It's not really about the music," she added. "It's about her day. So just something simple, familiar." My hand tightened around the phone. I could feel the corded muscles in my forearm twitch, but my voice came out soft. "Sure, whatever you need." "Great," she chirped. "Oh, and one more thing. Don't worry about dressing up too much. It's more intimate than formal." When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Just sat there. My hand still wrapped around the phone like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to this ridiculous performance we all kept pretending was a family. Later that evening, I opened my email to look for rehearsal details. Vera had forwarded the guest list. I scrolled past names I didn't recognize. Chair of Foundation, Dr. Mendez Plawan, Aunt Shelley, maybe. Then I found it. Odalyn Wren, piano girl, try not to overdress. I closed the laptop. Slowly. On my bookshelf, tucked inside a pale blue folder from years ago, was an old recital program. I hadn't opened it in years. It was from my senior performance, before everything changed. There it was, in looping script. Odalyn Wren, soloist. I traced the letters with my finger. So then I folded the program and slid it into the same drawer as the wedding invitation. Side by side, one said who I was, the other, who they thought I was now. She thought agreeing to play was the peace offering. She didn't realize it was the opening act of her humiliation. The package arrived late Friday morning. No note, no brand tag, just a plain brown box with my address and Vera's name as the sender. I carried it inside and set it on the small kitchen table, the one I used for sorting bills and lesson plans, and lately, emotional damage. I cut the tape and pulled back the flaps. Inside was a gown folded in a clear plastic garment bag. Beige, not champagne, not blush, not cream. Beige. The kind of color people painted waiting rooms and forgot existed. It had a faded hem and a neckline that dipped oddly off-center, like it had been altered once and then given up on. It smelled faintly like storage. I walked it to the living room and held it up in front of the mirror. It didn't fit the group photo Callista had texted the bridesmaids earlier that week. 6 women standing in a soft pink gradient, each dress tailored to their bodies, hair curled and shining under golden light. Mine didn't belong in the photo. I grabbed my phone and texted Vera. Me. Hey, is this the right dress? Mine looks different than the others. Her reply came instantly. Vera. It's neutral. You'll be at the piano anyway. Nobody's going to look at you. I stared at those words longer than I should have, not because they surprised me, but because of how easy it still was to be stunned by her, as if I kept hoping, against everything I knew, that maybe one day she'd write back with, "Oops, that was a mistake. You deserve better." I packed the dress into my travel garment bag and reminded myself to breathe. I had a rehearsal dinner to get to. By late afternoon, I was walking through the doors of the Rosemore Inn, where the welcome dinner was being held. The main dining hall smelled of garlic and fresh-cut hydrangeas. Guests were already filtering in, friends of the groom, cousins from out of state, some with name tags, others just mingling with polite champagne grins. I spotted my name folded in a tiny card, all the way at the end of a long banquet table. My chair was right next to the door leading into the catering kitchen. A waiter offered me water with a quick glance, and the kind of nod they give to staff, not guests. A few minutes later, Callista breezed in, glowing in soft silk and perfect foundation. Her hair was curled into effortless waves. She spotted me and walked over with the kind of air kiss that leaves no warmth. "Oh good, you made it," she said. "I told the planner you'd be here for the music stuff so they didn't have to adjust seating. You're good with something classical, right? Simple?" I said you'd be fine with simple. Her tone was light, like she was discussing napkin colors. I nodded once, too tightly. "Of course," I said. "Simple's my specialty." Before I could sit, Emerson approached. He extended a hand with a politician's smile. "You must be Odalyn," he said. "Callista told us you were the family pianist." The groom's mother, a tall woman in a burgundy wrap dress, leaned in with interest. "That's sweet," she said, patting my arm. "It's so important to have hired help you can trust at a big event like this." Hired help. I opened my mouth, but Vera had already joined the circle. She laughed politely, brushing the comment off like it didn't bruise. "Odalyn's been playing piano since she was a little girl. She's always been reliable." Reliable, not talented, not accomplished, just dependable. The way you'd talk about someone who feeds your cat when you're on vacation. I held my breath and smiled. We sat. I picked at the edges of my plate while the rest of the room clinked glasses and laughed like old friends. Occasionally, someone would glance my way, maybe to confirm I hadn't wandered off. But no one asked me anything beyond what I planned to play and whether I'd be wearing something more formal tomorrow. When it was over, I thanked the servers, stepped outside and walked to my car under the soft glare of streetlights. My shoes clicked against the gravel lot in that lonely way that makes you realize how small your presence really is. Back at the Airbnb, I changed out of the beige dress and laid it flat across the guest bed. The fabric caught the overhead light, dull and lifeless. It looked more like a hotel curtain than a dress. I stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch, but I did. Something in my chest twisted, not sharp, just deep, like a bruise that was never allowed to fade. After a while, I unzipped the front pocket of my suitcase and pulled out the black velvet folder I always brought to performances. Inside were my pieces: Rachmaninoff, Liszt, Chopin, music that used to make me feel like I was more than background. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened to the first page. I wasn't here to take up space, but I wasn't here to disappear either. I told myself it didn't matter. I was here for peace, for family, for them. But the sun had barely climbed past the magnolia trees when I realized I'd made a mistake. The wedding ceremony was set outdoors, beneath white drapery and low-hanging string lights that were already flickering softly in the early afternoon haze. Garden chairs faced a makeshift altar framed with climbing roses. Somewhere behind me, a quartet of servers lined up water glasses and repositioned the dessert table under a shaded canopy. I'd arrived early, Vera's orders. She'd wanted me to test the mic, make sure your little piano works with the setup, as if I'd wheeled the Steinway baby grand here myself. The staff had positioned the piano awkwardly off to the side, tucked between the speaker stack and a catering tent that smelled of chicken marsala and rosemary. It wasn't near the stage, nor was it angled toward the audience. It was tucked in like a piece of furniture someone didn't know where to place. I ran a hand over the keys and adjusted the bench, already feeling the sweat settle between my shoulder blades. I was wearing the beige dress again. This time, I hadn't bothered to smooth out the creases. Vera's voice rang out behind me, already mic'd up. "Let's run a quick check, shall we? Just a few notes." I nodded and played a soft arpeggio. The speakers caught it late, echoing the sound like it didn't quite belong in the space. I tried again, slower, and Vera turned toward the crowd, lifting her hand to shield her eyes from the sun. "Perfect," she said. Then she turned back to the gathering guests and smiled into the mic. "Everyone, welcome. What a beautiful day for a celebration. Before we begin, a quick note. Today's ceremony is accompanied by a special touch. Our talented little helper will be providing background music throughout. She's always been so good at staying in the background." There was light laughter. A few people clapped, unsure if they were supposed to. I didn't flinch, but I felt the twitch in my hand on the keys. Just a flutter, like my body trying to betray me. I forced a small smile and focused on the black and ivory in front of me. "Keep your head down," I told myself. "It's only music. You've done this 100 times." I waited. The real signal hadn't come yet. Vera walked off the platform and a few bridesmaids passed by, adjusting their hair, taking selfies, complimenting each other's lashes. One glanced over at me and said, "Cute dress," in the way someone might say, "Nice umbrella," when it's sunny. Then Callista approached, floating down the aisle like the day belonged to her alone. She looked breathtaking, of course, her gown sculpted to her figure like poured silk. She had always known how to catch the light. She leaned in close, lips almost brushing my ear. Her perfume smelled like lavender and condescension. "Play this, won't you?" she whispered, sliding a folded sheet of music onto the stand. "I wrote it just for today. It's called Promise of a Perfect Day. Simple and soft, just like you used to play when we were little." I blinked down at the handwritten notes. It was basic. Predictable chord progressions, a melody that tiptoed instead of dancing. It wasn't just amateur, it was childish. And she wanted me to play it, in front of all these people. The past tugged at me like a thread unraveling. I was 17 again, sitting under hot stage lights at a regional competition, my fingers flying through Chopin's Ballade in G minor. Vera sat in the third row, hands folded tightly in her lap. Callista had been near the back, wearing a floral dress and an impatient frown. Afterward, she hadn't clapped. That same night, she cried in the car. I remember the whimper. "You always make it about you." Vera had turned around and snapped, "Could you just stop stealing every moment from your sister?" That was the moment something cracked. The piano had once felt like breath and fire in my bones. After that night, it felt like guilt, like vanity, like something I should hide. I looked at the sheet again, simple and soft. Of course, so I stay forgettable. The guests began to shift. The procession was about to start. I adjusted the music on the stand. My fingers hovered over the keys, and I played. The melody tiptoed across the garden like a child unsure of its place. It said nothing. It filled space. It echoed softly, then vanished before anyone could remember it was there. The applause from the ceremony still echoed faintly across the lawn when I slipped away from the noise. I didn't go far, just beyond the flickering string lights, through the narrow stone path that curved behind the reception tent. The magnolias thinned out, and I found myself standing before the hydrangea bushes near the fence line. And that's where she was. Grandma Miriam, half sunk into a white wicker chair, her cardigan draped loosely over her shoulders. She was humming softly, the way she always did when her hands weren't busy. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound until I heard it again in the dark. She turned her head before I spoke, like she'd already known I was coming. "There you are," she said. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, but it still carried the same warmth that had soothed me through every skinned knee and disappointment. "You looked lovely out there, even if they tried to hide you." I sat down on the small bench across from her. The silence between us felt like a blanket, familiar, safe. She reached for my hand. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pressed something into my palm. A folded envelope yellowed at the edges. "Your father meant to give you this," she whispered. "They never sent it." I looked down. No return address, just my name in his old handwriting. The seal was already broken. I opened it slowly, like it might shatter in the air. Inside was a letter from Juilliard, a full scholarship, summer intensive, then fall admission, dated 15 years ago. I forgot how to breathe. I read it again, slower this time, my eyes catching the line about exceptional promise and rare control of tone. I remembered that audition, remembered coming home, my fingers aching from the Rachmaninoff cadenza, my chest still heaving from nerves. That night, Vera had walked into my room and said, "They weren't interested, too many better candidates this year." And just like that, I'd believed her. Swallowed it whole. My throat clenched. Grandma didn't speak. She just watched me, her eyes damp but steady. I knew then, she'd known. Maybe not everything, but enough. The rest of the puzzle fit too easily. A week later, Vera had stood beside Callista at that stupid ribbon cutting for the Youth Arts Collective, a music nonprofit Callista founded with backing from the same foundation that partnered with Juilliard. I remembered the article in the paper. I remembered how Vera kept calling Callista visionary. I remembered shrinking. My dream had never failed me. It had been buried. I sat there, hunched forward, the letter still in my lap. My fingers had curled slightly, but I hadn't realized until I noticed the faint crease I'd made in the paper. I smoothed it gently, then folded it again, this time on my terms. A breeze rustled the trees behind us. From the main lawn, laughter floated out with the faint chime of glassware. Grandma reached over, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "You weren't weak," she said. "They just made sure you felt small enough to forget how strong you were." I nodded, but didn't speak. I wasn't sure I could yet. Later, when I returned to the reception hall, my heels clicked too loud against the hardwood floor. The lights inside had dimmed for the slideshow. Everyone faced the projector screen, half lit in flickers of color and childhood nostalgia. The title card read, "Our Journey, Callista and Family." I stood near the back. The first slide showed Callista at 4 in a tutu, the next blowing out candles on her 6th birthday. Then came recitals, Callista holding a tiny violin, then posing with a local choir. There were beach photos, Thanksgiving dinner, a blurry video clip of Vera adjusting Callista's sash at a middle school awards night. I waited. The loop continued. There were no pictures of me, not even in the background. No Halloween costumes, no piano trophies, not even the group shot at the lake house, where I knew for a fact I'd been the one behind the camera. The audience clapped politely at the end. Vera stood and lifted a champagne glass, glowing under the amber lights. "To my beautiful daughter," she said, "every moment with you has been a joy to relive." I didn't lift my glass. I didn't even blink. My eyes stayed fixed on the blank screen, now white again, like someone had wiped it clean, like a chalkboard that never had my name on it to begin with. They hadn't just rewritten the story. They had made sure I didn't exist in it. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't walk out. But inside, something shifted. A weight I'd carried for years, the need to be quiet, to not ruin the piece, started to slide off inch by inch. This time, it wasn't going to crush me. The air was still cool when I arrived at the hotel, the kind of heavy quiet that only happens early in the morning before weddings. I walked through the valet lot, clutching my folder of sheet music and adjusting the hem of that beige dress, still a little too short on one side, still not quite mine. I approached the main doors with the printed confirmation in hand, expecting a nod and a welcome. Instead, I was stopped. A hotel coordinator, clipboard in one hand, headset clipped to her ear, held up her palm. "Hi, vendors are checking in around the back," she said without looking up. "I'm not with catering," I said. "I'm the bride's sister." She blinked, pausing for the first time. "Oh," she said slowly, flipping pages. "Sorry, you weren't listed in the family section. We had you with music services." I stood still, hearing the words echo in the atrium's glass walls. She waved someone over with a strained smile. "It's fine. Just let her through." I was led around the side entrance anyway. Through the service hallway, past a man carrying stacked linens, a teenager unboxing plastic champagne flutes. When I emerged into the prep area of the ballroom, I had the strange sense I had never left backstage. Later, I made my way into the adjoining breakfast room for the family welcome meal. Vera had organized a small, formal affair, her version of Southern charm, which meant assigned seating and monogrammed cloth napkins. The tables were set in a wide U-shape. I found my name, not next to Callista, not between any cousins, not even in the cluster labeled family, just one small card at the edge, set slightly askew. Miss Odalyn Wren, piano accompanist. I stood there longer than I should have. A staff member breezed by, adjusted a centerpiece, glanced at me like I was in her way. I sat down quietly. From across the room, I watched the rest of them filter in. One cousin in a matching blush pink wrap dress, another bridesmaid squealed over mimosas. Then came Vera, gliding in with the familiarity of someone completely in control of the scene. Callista entered last. Of course, hair swept into a chignon, skin glowing under the soft gold lighting. When she stepped into the room, people actually clapped. Vera walked to her, kissed her cheek. Then she turned to me with a practiced smile. "Try not to play too loud during the vows," she said under her breath, adjusting the neckline of Callista's dress. "It's Callista's moment. We don't want distractions." I nodded, but didn't respond, because if I had spoken, it would have come out as a scream. Instead, I stood and excused myself, said something vague about needing to tune the piano. No one really noticed. Out in the hallway, I leaned against the cold marble wall and pulled my phone from my clutch. I opened my draft folder. There it was, just as I'd left it. Subject, resignation, community arts program. I had written the draft weeks ago, assuming that after this wedding, after keeping my head down one last time, I'd be free. I'd walk away from teaching, from music, from the last tether that kept me hoping for something that never came. But now, I wasn't so sure. I stared at the blinking cursor. My finger hovered over delete, then hovered over send. Then I locked the screen. I reached into my bag for tissues. Instead, my fingers closed around something firmer, thicker, the Juilliard letter. I had placed it there before leaving the Airbnb, folded carefully beside my lipstick and metronome keychain. I slid it out. My thumb ran over the crease I'd made last night. Full academic award, room and board. 5 words that had once meant everything, then meant nothing, and now meant something different altogether. I could have gone. I should have gone. But I didn't. And the thing is, it wasn't because I wasn't ready. It was because someone made that choice for me and called it love. A few deep breaths, steady but tight. Then I folded the letter and slipped it back in. When I returned to the breakfast room, the plates were mostly cleared. People laughed. Someone had started a toast. Callista beamed. I walked back to my seat without a word. But before sitting, I unlatched the leather folder of sheet music I'd carried all morning. Tucked behind the requested selections was my own copy, handwritten, edited, bolded notes, swells I had mapped with pencil years ago. I switched it out. No one saw, no one asked, but they would hear. By the time guests began to settle into their white folding chairs beneath the magnolia canopy, the air had turned thick with anticipation and sweat. I stood alone near the piano, half in shadow, half in glare from the low sun filtering through the draped linen canopy above. My dress, still beige, still quietly offensive, blended perfectly into the background linen, as if I'd been meant to disappear. I could hear the distant chatter of cousins and neighbors, waiters moving trays of champagne, and beyond the gauzy curtain at the garden's edge, Callista's voice, laughing, delicate, practiced. I glanced down at the keyboard and rested my hands above the keys. My fingers hovered, not touching, just breathing there. They'd told me exactly what to play. Promise of a Perfect Day, a piece that wasn't written for music but for optics, light, frothy, forgettable, just the right soundtrack to make the bride look radiant without drawing attention anywhere else. But as the first note approached, I didn't reach for Callista's sheet music. Instead, I reached for my own, tucked between the pages like it had always been there. I placed the sheet gently onto the stand. Then I began. The first note came slow, heavier than I'd intended, almost unsure. But then the second found it, and the third reached deeper. It was a melody I hadn't played aloud in 15 years. I'd written it during those lost afternoons in high school, when the world felt like too much and yet nowhere near enough. I played it to soothe myself when the rejection letters came in, not knowing they'd never been sent. The chords were dark, then rising, minor turns that flirted with hope. There was no bright resolution, just a truth I'd carried in secret for too long. The guests shifted in their chairs, a few whispered, someone cleared their throat, but no one interrupted. And I didn't stop. A hush settled like a soft blanket over the crowd. Even the servers had paused at the tent's edge. Then, halfway through the piece, just as I lifted into the bridge, the speakers crackled. A man's voice filled the garden. Not a stranger's, my father's. To my daughter, Odalyn, the one who taught herself to fly even when we clipped her wings. A collective intake of breath spread across the lawn. Several heads turned, including the minister. The voice continued, slow and worn with emotion. I recorded this the day Juilliard called. I wish I could have protected that dream longer. I wish I'd fought harder. I froze, hands suspended above the keys. The last time I heard that voice was at his funeral. The recording played on, not long, but long enough to slice open every room I'd been locked out of, enough to say what no one else had dared. Gasps turned to silence. Callista, framed perfectly at the start of the aisle, clutching her bouquet like it might break, stood motionless beneath the floral arch. Vera? Vera didn't blink. She sat stone still, eyes narrowed toward the speaker as if she could will it off with just her rage. I closed my eyes and let the final notes fall gently from my hands. They didn't land in applause. They landed in silence, the kind of silence that swells in your chest, that makes people look at each other differently. For a second, no one moved. I looked up, not even the wind dared, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt undeniable. The final chord still lingered in the air, suspended between the branches of the magnolia trees and the silence that swallowed the courtyard whole. No one moved. No one dared. Callista remained frozen beneath the floral archway, bouquet wilting slightly in her grip. Vera hadn't spoken, but her eyes darted like she was searching for a script, one that had somehow slipped from her hand. Then came the sound of a chair gently creaking. It was Thane Rowe. He had once been my conductor years ago, when I still believed talent could rise above politics. Now older, heavier, but no less sharp in presence, he stood from the second row and stepped forward with the deliberate grace only a man used to commanding a stage could possess. In his hand was a folded paper. The edges were worn, the kind of creases that only come from being carried and protected. I wasn't sure if this would ever leave my briefcase, he began, voice calm but steady. 15 years ago I signed this letter on Juilliard's letterhead, a full scholarship, for Odalyn Wren. Gasps rippled across the crowd like wind cutting through wheat. He raised the page, facing the guests like a conductor raising his baton. Her acceptance was confirmed. Her attendance? Blocked. I didn't breathe. My fingers curled beneath the edge of the piano bench. Vera's complexion paled. She gripped the edge of her seat as if she could steady reality by anchoring herself physically. Her lips parted, then pressed shut again. Nothing came out. But Callista stepped forward, shaking her head with forced lightness. That letter. It was never mailed. You don't have proof she could have handled that kind of pressure, that kind of institution. Thane turned to her, expression unreadable. It wasn't mailed because someone in her family requested the foundation redirect the funds. That I do have in writing. A murmur erupted. Not confusion this time, but realization. A few guests turned toward Vera, some toward Callista. A couple stood from their seats entirely, edging closer like they needed to see it for themselves. I didn't move. I didn't need to. A small voice, barely audible, cut through the growing buzz. She taught me. Everyone turned. It was Lydia. 12, in braces and ballet flats, one of my piano students from the community center. She stepped forward, twisting a wrinkled tissue between her fingers. She taught me what it means to believe in your sound, even when no one else hears it. Her voice cracked and she blinked hard. I used to whisper, in everything, even when I played. She told me that silence doesn't make you safe, it just makes you easier to ignore. Her last words came out as a whisper, but they struck louder than any mic'd speech that day. Lydia looked toward me, eyes glassy but proud. Then she turned and walked back to her seat. There was no applause, no music, just shifting silence. A woman from the groom's side, his aunt, I later learned, said just loud enough for others to hear, "She's the only reason I didn't leave after the second toast." Another man near her nodded. Same. I still hadn't stood. My hands rested neatly on my lap. My gaze remained steady. Vera looked like she might speak, might shout, but no one handed her a microphone. For once, there was no sudden favor, no rescue moment where she could reclaim control. And Callista? She reached for the mic stand behind the floral pedestal, but her hand met nothing. The microphone was gone. Someone had taken it before she got there. I didn't smile, not because I didn't feel something rise within me, but because it wasn't joy, it was something else, something quieter, older. The sound of a truth finally being heard. Callista's fingers hovered in the air, awkward and twitching. The microphone had vanished, like someone had quietly decided she'd spoken enough for one lifetime. She cleared her throat, forced a brittle smile, and raised her voice without the amplifier. "Let's not get lost in theatrics," she began, her tone pitched higher than usual, as if volume could substitute for credibility. This day, this ceremony, was meant to be a celebration of love, of unity, not personal grievances or exaggerated performances. Her gaze swept the courtyard like a performer gauging a reluctant audience. "I understand emotions are running high," she said, hand dramatically resting on her chest. "But I think we can all agree that forged letters and staged confessions don't belong at a wedding." She paused, expecting some polite agreement. There was none. Still, she pressed forward. "I have documentation here that confirms Adelin's application was rejected. I didn't want to share this, but given what's happened..." She turned, gesturing to a man in a dark suit who handed her a printed paper from a slim leather folder. She held it up like proof in a courtroom. "Juilliard said no, so while I'm sure the story was heartfelt, it wasn't real. And I'm sorry, but we can't keep letting a piano player hijack an entire wedding." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. But I felt every stare shift between us like a ripple across a pond. For a moment, the crowd was still, uncertain, testing her tone, weighing her confidence. The lie was dressed up, delivered clean, and rehearsed. I recognized the trick. She was trying to rewrite the narrative, quickly, while the emotions were still raw. Vera gave her a slight, steady nod from her seat, the kind of support that says, "Keep going, they might still believe you." And for one split second, I saw it working. Then, a voice interrupted from the side aisle. "I don't care who said what," the man said, standing tall in a crisp gray jacket. "I want to hear her play again." A murmur ran through the guests. Someone clapped, another followed, then a third, and none of it was for Callista. She tried to speak again, but her words were buried under a tide of rising applause. The spotlight, once fixed squarely on the aisle, now turned, almost hesitantly, back toward the grand piano. I stood, the beige fabric of my dress brushing past my calves, and walked toward the bench. There was no speech, no declaration. I simply sat. Someone had placed my music folder on the stand, but inside, I slid in a different page, one I had handwritten years ago. A piece I never finished until last night. The melody began low. A single line. Then another joined it. And then came the thread that stitched them together. The lullaby my grandmother used to hum. The one I heard beside the hydrangeas. The notes weren't sweet. They were resolute. The chords didn't cry. They confessed. And as the music climbed, winding through every omission, every unspoken insult, every moment I was told to sit down and smile, I felt my chest open. Not with grief, with clarity. People leaned forward. Some stood. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a staff member approach the front. In his hand, crumpled but intact, was the original wedding invitation, the one that read, "Piano Girl," tentative. He placed it gently beside the bench. Someone had scribbled over it in blue pen. 4 words, small but sure, the one they buried. But someone else had crossed that out too, and beneath it, in bolder strokes, the one they should have celebrated. I kept playing. I didn't look up, not even when I heard someone crying in the 3rd row, not even when Callista turned her back to the crowd, and not even when Vera slowly, silently, rose from her seat and slipped out the side garden gate. The piece ended not in triumph, but in stillness, like a lake after a storm. No cue was needed. The applause roared, sudden and full, not rushed, not polite. It echoed across the courtyard, across the trees, across 15 years of silence, and it did not stop. The wind had picked up slightly by the time the last guests filtered out of the garden courtyard. Petals that had been meticulously scattered for the ceremony now floated unevenly across the brick walkway. Champagne flutes stood half full, lipstick-stained, forgotten. A string quartet quietly packed up without fanfare. The applause had long faded, but its echo lingered. I stayed seated with my grandmother on the terrace of the hotel. She had brought us 2 cups of tea. Hers was steeped strong and dark, mine lighter, though neither of us had touched them. She leaned slightly forward in her chair, her fingers folded around the envelope like she was tucking a memory back into place. "The world didn't get it wrong, darling," she said, her voice low but steady. "They just got there late." I didn't say anything. I just watched her fold the Juilliard letter carefully, the same way she used to fold warm towels fresh from the line. Below us, Vera walked past. She didn't stop, didn't pause, just walked, heels clipped, shoulders tight, gaze somewhere far off in the middle distance. She didn't look up at me, and for the first time in years, I didn't look down. Callista stood at the edge of the steps, near one of the magnolia trees. She held her bouquet like an afterthought. Not a single guest had followed her, not even the wedding planner. She caught my eye. There was a moment, small, almost microscopic, where her chin lifted slightly, as if waiting for me to come over. Say something. Maybe offer her a graceful exit. I didn't. She blinked first, and I stayed seated beside my grandmother. Later that evening, as the cleanup crew folded chairs and rolled away cables, I heard someone speaking near the exit. It was a man in a dark jacket, one of the donors who had spoken to Thane earlier. I caught only fragments. Misleading representation, ethical concern, board review. They were talking about Callista's Music Foundation. Vera's name came up, then disappeared just as quickly. Not shouted, just noted. The kind of note that lingers in the air long after the room's been cleared. Inside, someone was updating the event program on the venue's website. I watched through the open glass doors as the line beneath musical guest changed. No longer background accompaniment. Now, feature performance, Odalyn Wren, original composition. I didn't smile, but I did breathe. A staff member approached from the side garden. It was the same one who'd handed me the crumpled invitation earlier. He held it again, now even more creased than before. "Someone left this near the piano," he said. "Thought you might want it." I opened it gently. The words, "Piano Girl," tentative, were still there, but scribbled out now, covered in block letters on the back, black pen pressed deep into the fibers. "Thank you for saving the room." Weeks later, I pinned that note to my corkboard in the office at the community center. Just beneath it, I unfolded an old recital program, the one from my teenage years. The one I hadn't looked at in more than a decade. My name was still there, written in swirled script. Odalyn Wren, soloist. I didn't cry, but I let it stay unfolded. It was a Monday when I met her, my new student, 13 years old, elbows too pointy for the bench, sneakers too loud for the carpet. She barely spoke, but she never broke eye contact when she sat down. I asked her if she wanted to learn scales. She shook her head. "They say I'm too quiet to matter," she mumbled, "too invisible to be heard." I looked at her, and for the briefest moment, I saw myself again. Hands smaller, voice dimmer, heart louder than anyone ever knew. So I smiled and said, "Then play something they can't ignore." She looked down at the keys, and I looked ahead. Not because I wanted the spotlight. I just wanted them to hear me. And this time, they did.